Welcome to Moms and Mountains, a podcast for moms of all types, divorced, single, married, or widowed. We'll talk about our kids, life, marriages, families, ourselves, and most importantly, our relationship with God. I want to empower all moms to overcome the greatest and smallest mountains of our lives through the power of Jesus Christ. And I want all moms to know they are not alone in their struggles. Thank you for joining me, and let's get into the episode. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3. Today we're doing a special episode. I have Heidi and Blakely, a mother and daughter team who volunteer for Operation Christmas Child, organized by Samaritan's Purse. This is a program you may have heard of. Many churches and schools participate in this program. Operation Christmas Child uses gift-filled shoeboxes to deliver joy and the good news of Jesus Christ around the world. So for some children, this is the first gift that they've ever received. Operation Christmas Child collects the shoeboxes and filled by those of us who are a little more fortunate, and uses local church partners to deliver these gifts along with the gospel, which is the most important piece of this. I met Blakely and Heidi at a church function last week, actually, and had heard them speak and was very moved by what they were saying. And it was kind of a short time frame where they were speaking, so I kind of wanted to bring them on and hear a little bit more about their experiences and just hear them speak. I had always known about the shoeboxes. I thought it was a really cool concept, but I didn't know the depth of what happened on the other side when that box was received by the children. Just kind of wanted to get into personal experience. They had both volunteered over in Africa to deliver shoeboxes and to be on that other side. And I thought it was really cool and a bonus that they were a mother-daughter team. All right, so I am going to go ahead and let them talk now because this is not about me today. So, Blakely and Heidi, how long have you been volunteering with this program?
Well, I've been packing shoeboxes since I was 5, and I'm 21 now, so total 16 years. But I have been volunteering with them since I was 15, 14, something like that. Something along those lines. Mm-hmm. So a handful of years. And then whenever I was 15, I had the opportunity to go to Nosy Bay, Madagascar, and deliver shoeboxes.
And for me, we started at home with the children. Blakely is the youngest of my children. And we packed shoeboxes, and we would go to Walmart and we'd buy the plastic boxes, and I'd hand them to the kids and say, okay, go fill them up. And then we'd meet at the cash register and check out, and then we'd spend the afternoon taking things out of packages and filling them up. And we did that for a while, and I saw in a magazine or something that you could go and volunteer at the processing center. So after you pack the shoeboxes, then they process them before they're sent overseas. And I just thought, man, that would be so cool to be able to go do that someday. And at one point, we had moved, and the processing center was closer to where we were living at that time. And we had the opportunity to go and process the shoeboxes. And from there, I found out you could volunteer year-round and be involved in the ministry all the time. And I was amazed. So I jumped on board right away. And then I said, Blakely, you've got to do this. So that's where we started. And it's just, it all started with packing shoeboxes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Heidi, how did you get started? So I know you talked a little bit about how you kind of got more into volunteering all year, but how did you get started in the very beginning with the program?
Just packing shoeboxes?
Yes.
It was just, you hear it at church,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't understand it. I just knew that it would be a way for me to show my kids that we can do this for other children.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always, it's close to Christmas time, and it's not always about getting something for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
It's about an opportunity to give something to other children. And so I use that as an opportunity to teach my children, this is what we're going to do. You will have a time when Christmas comes, you'll get things for Christmas. But this is our time to give something to somebody else. So that's where it really started in our house.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And Blakely, you said you started when you were very young, right?
Yep.
Was it exciting for you right off the bat, or was it kind of not until you got older that it kind of sunk in?
I think, like, it definitely was exciting for me as a kid, but now it's more exciting in a different way. Because as a kid, it was, oh, like, I get to, like, have this connection with a little girl that's my age. I can, like, I'll put this together with stuff that I think would be cool, and I can, give that, like, joy and happiness to, like, someone else like me. And I always had, like, that, like little kid, like, back in my mind, like, oh, what if I get a pen pal out of this? Oh, that'd be so fun. And so that was kind of my excitement out of it. And then I started year-round volunteering and kind of heard more about the ministry. And then it really sunk in whenever I actually went to Madagascar. Just the breadth and depth of this ministry, because it goes a lot deeper than just, oh yeah, we give a kid a Christmas present, because it's a serious presentation of the gospel and a tangible way for them to understand the gift that Christ is able to give them, and kind of an opportunity to put Christ front and center in these communities that don't often have that opportunity. So.
Right. But it seems like you've always been really into it, which is awesome. I know sometimes when you're a kid, you're kind of like, oh, Mom, I don't want to do this. But that's awesome that this has been, since the beginning, something that you've been passionate about. So you had said you both applied, right, to go overseas to actually deliver the shoeboxes. Is that right?
So
if you want to talk about that.
Do you want to tell the story of me applying from your perspective?
Sure. Yes, I will do that. So I believe kind of the way it happened, and Blakely can talk to a little bit more about the way she saw it happening. I just remember getting an email saying, Blakely, hey, there's this opportunity it's called a student vision trip, and you had to apply for it. And I have always taught my kids, apply for everything. The worst they can say is no. So, we shouldn't decide their no for them. Let them tell us no. Apply for it all. So I said, you could apply. Like, you qualify for all the things that were on there, so just apply and see what happens. So she said, okay. So she went through the process and applied, and then she got a phone call saying, we want to do an interview. So this just wasn't, hey, you applied, okay, we accept you. Like, then she had to sit and do this one interview, right? So they scheduled this interview, and she was, it was just on the phone, but there were 2 or 3 people on this phone call with her, and she went off to the room, so we didn't hear anything we didn't hear any of the phone call, and she came out and she said, that was awful.
Oh, no.
I totally bombed that.
Oh, no.
It was awful. I'm not going. And I said, that's okay. Like, that is okay. We have to try. And maybe the next time will be better. And you can apply again next year, because, there's always opportunity. And if this isn't the right thing, if God closes that door, there'll be another opportunity somewhere else. So life went on. And so from my perspective, this is what happened. She had, it was homecoming or prom.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was a formal. And she had gone to it, and the date, the time frame they gave us of when they were going to make the decision had pretty much passed. And we hadn't heard anything. And so we were like, it's okay. We were kind of over it, moving on, not really thinking about it anymore. And she had this formal, she went to it. It was very, very late at night. By the time we got back, we picked her up. Her dad and I picked her up, and we came home, and she was getting cleaned up, and we were getting ready for bed. And all of a sudden she yells, oh my gosh. And she comes running down the hallway, and we're like, what is going on? She goes, I'm going to Madagascar. And I said, you're what? And she said, I just got the email. It was in my email. I'm going to Africa. And I was like, oh, that's fantastic. Then we shut the bedroom door, and she goes back down the hallway to her room, and my husband turns to me and he goes, what?
Oh, no.
We're going to let her go to Africa? And I said, you cannot say that in front of her.
Now you had to make the decision, right?
Oh no, the decision was made. There was no saying no. She was going.
Yeah.
And we had to pray about it and be okay with it because it was like, it was shocking.
You had to put your child in God's hands.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So time went by and the date came, and to give you some perspective, we didn't know anybody who was going with her. We didn't know there are adults who are chaperoning, and there were 25 teens to early 20s that were going, and we didn't know anybody.
Wow.
Anybody. And we had to trust the Lord. We had to trust these other people. And we took her to the Atlanta airport, and we stood on the outside of the international security gates. And we were like, okay, we're going to stay here until you get on the other side and you call us when you see somebody wearing the same shirt you're wearing.
Right.
And, so we lived about 3 hours from Atlanta at that point in time. And that was a long drive home.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
To know that, by the time we got home, she was just getting on the airplane. And my husband would get on the computer or get on his phone, and he would track the airplane to see where it was overseas and has it landed yet. And she should have landed by now. And I know there's Wi-Fi in the airport, and she should be calling us.
Oh, wow.
So your perspective.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'll apply to this, and we'll see what happens. It'll be cool if I get the opportunity to go, because I'd never been overseas before. I was like, all right, so we'll apply, see what happens. And they're like, hey, we want to interview you. I'm 15. The only interview I had done was the one interview for my high school job. And so I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. And so get on the phone call, and it's just 3 like super nice people from the ministry, and they're just like, hey, like, we want to ask a few questions because we have like a specific mindset and a specific purpose for these students going overseas. It's not just for you guys to like see things. We want you guys to come back and tell. And we want to make sure that you're willing to come back and tell. And I was like, oh yeah, I have no problem with doing that. And then they asked me some other questions, just kind of getting to know me and my personality. And my mind sitting there overanalyzing everything, like I'm answering as honestly as possible, of course. But then back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm definitely not the person they're looking for. Like, they're definitely not going to choose me, or my answers are too timid, or, I'm just too nervous, and they're just not, like, I'm not going to be the type of person that they're going to want to call. And just back of my mind relating it, I'm like, oh, yeah, just like Moses, like, oh, yeah, no, like, I'm too timid with this. I'm only 15. Like, why would they choose me to come back and talk to churches about this? But yeah, so I did the interview and just telling them, I was like, yeah, I don't think it'll happen. And so, like she said, life went on, came back, I was in my room, and I had just pulled my phone up to check my emails, or to check my phone and stuff, and I saw that I had got an email. I checked it, and I was like, because I think it was past midnight whenever I had gotten this. And so I had seen it, I was like, there's no freaking way. Like, first of all, it's extremely late at night, so why are they sending emails this late?
Right.
Second of all, I actually got it. Awesome. So run down the hallway and tell them, go back to the bed and attempt to actually get to sleep, because I think I had work or something the next morning too. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm going to Madagascar. And so then you had all the preparations of like getting passports and all of that like stressful stuff, and it's just like, okay, well, this is happening. So we get to the airport, and I get through the terminal, and I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, like, I've been through airports before, so I was like, okay, just follow the signs. Like, I'll go to whatever gate I'm supposed to be there, and then maybe other people that are supposed to be there will be there too. So I get over there, and I see a group of like 20 people all huddled together, sitting on the floor, wearing like Operation Christmas Child like shirts and stuff, and then like one very tall man with like black hair wearing an OCC shirt, and he looks over and sees me. He goes, oh, hey, are you Blakely? And I'm like, oh yeah, I am. And he's like, yeah, we've spoken on the phone, and that's it. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome, I know none of you. But yeah, so it was kind of nerve-wracking, but it was also like, okay, cool. And so it was a very long plane ride because we flew from the Atlanta airport to France and then from France down to Madagascar.
Yeah.
It was like 19 hours of flying
Wow.
in one day. And so I had a long time to learn who these people were that I was going to be spending the next week with, and we became very close. But yeah, so it was a very exciting beginning to that whole week for sure.
Heidi, you also went
I did.
to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that start? Was it the same time, or did you go a different year, or?
I went actually 2 years later,
Okay.
and the process for adults is much different.
Okay.
It is by invitation only.
Oh, wow.
And so I had no expectation of ever being invited. One, because we move a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and there are certain parameters they look for, certain things that they're looking for, and because we move, it's hard to track those things. And so I really didn't think it was not why we were involved in the ministry.
Right.
So it was not really something that I had on my radar. It wasn't really something I was working towards. And when you're year-round volunteering, you have leadership over you. And a couple of the leaders in that area invited me to lunch, but I didn't think anything about it because we did it all the time.
Right.
So it was just like, oh, we're going to get together for lunch and we're going to talk about the next events we have coming up, or just different things in the area. And so we were sitting there just kind of chatting, and all of a sudden the atmosphere got really weird. And one of them started laughing, and then the other one's looking very serious, and I think they're fixing to kick me out. I don't know what's going on, but it is really weird. And then one of the leaders said, we'd like to invite you to go on a vision trip with us in 2019 to South Africa. So I was shocked, absolutely shocked. I could not have, there's just no words. I can't, even to this day, I remember that moment, and it takes my breath away. There was no expectation of any of that. So,
and Operation Christmas Child is worldwide,
yes.
right?
Yes.
So the chances of you both going to somewhere in Africa around the same time, I mean, even
within
though
2 years,
within 2 years, kind of close to each other is kind of wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
And then with the amount of volunteers that there are,
Right.
Because the student volunteer application pool was huge, and then just all of the other volunteers for the adult side of it that are all over the U.S. 1 in 1,000 or more chance of that happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So I want to go into a little bit of what your experiences were on the ground. So Blakely, if you want to start with Madagascar, and first tell me, how long were you there?
So I was there for a week. We were doing actual distributions for 5 days, then bookended by travel days.
Okay. So it was 5 days. So I'm sure there's a ton of stuff, but if you want, I'll just let you tell me what impacted you the most from that time frame. The eyebrows are going up.
That's the easy question,
right?
The funny thing is, that's one of the most commonly asked questions. I was like, oh, what impacted you the most from being there for 5 days? And it's like, well, it was a storyline of impacts. Because at that time I was 15, and so that's kind of like whenever you're trying to figure out who you are, and you're really actually coming into your Christianity and making it yourself. Because I was blessed to be raised in a Christian household. But the difficult part with that is learning the difference between it's the religion of my parents versus it's the relationship that I have. And so I was kind of struggling through that in that moment, and figuring out who I was in Christ and what all that meant. That whole week was just a very large, I guess, life-altering situation for my spiritual life, because that's whenever I understood God's presence, and I was able to actually be oh no, he's big. he is everywhere, and he is immense. And so it was just a lot of things back to back. The main thing that always hits my mind is my first distribution. because, like I said, I've been packing shoeboxes since I was 5, so I knew about, the kids get it, and I've seen some of the videos. 3, 2, 1, yay, they open their boxes. But those videos don't do it justice. So it was our first distribution, and we were all, like, excitedly nervous, because we're like, oh, like, what's it going to be like? How are the kids going to react? What all is going to happen? And so we get to our first distribution site, and we're parked up on a hill. And we're actually right next to this tin building that has blue shutters on it. But it was, like, kind of, like, decorated more than the other buildings that we had seen. And so we're like, oh, that's interesting. Like, oh, what is that? We were asking the translators and some of the pastors that were going with us. And they were like, oh, that's one of the churches in this area, but it's currently closed right now because they don't have a pastor. But the church we are going to is right behind it. So we got off the bus and we walked around this church and down a hill. And we came around this curve. And right as we came around this curve, we saw just this clearing with a tin, like, shack. Not super big. I would say it was maybe like a 20-foot by 10-foot room, and there was just shoes spilling out the front door, and like these like blue and white like curtains were like blowing out of the windows, and it was really cool to look at, because you're like, I've seen this type of thing before, like in pictures, but like I can already tell from out here that place is jammed full of people. And so we walk down and we're talking to the pastors. They're thanking us for coming, and they have us coming through the side door, and we come in and all of the kids are there, like packed front to back, like standing room only. And so we're standing by the side, and they start doing praise and worship, and these kids are singing and they're clapping and they're so happy to be there. But they actually don't really know why they're there. They're told that there was a program at the church and they'll receive a free gift afterwards. But they don't know what the gift is, because all the shoeboxes are covered in blankets. And so the kids are just, they're there for possibly the free gift, but they're also, like, paying attention. Like, normally if you're in a situation like that, like, if you have the few kids that do come, like in America, then they're there, but they're not mentally there,
Right. Yes.
Their focus is whatever bag of candy or whatever is on the other end.
Yes.
But they sing and they do some praise and worship, and it's just so beautiful. Like, I still, to this day, it is the most beautiful church that I've ever seen, just simply because of the heart and soul that the pastors put into it, and just the presence of God that was there in that day. The kids are praising and singing. The pastor comes up and he does a gospel presentation, and all of these kids are just laser focused. Like, they are paying attention to every single word that he is saying, and he is just explaining to them the gift that Jesus gives us, and how we've all sinned and fallen short, and how even though that you do something that hurts your brother or sister's feelings, and you're doing these things that are bad, Jesus still loves you, and he still wants to be by your side and be your friend. And he kind of ended it by asking everybody, he was like, so do you want to be friends with Jesus? And of course all the kids are like, yeah, like a friend that doesn't abandon me? Yeah, that sounds great. After they finished the gospel presentation, he's like, thank you guys so much for coming. We actually are having a program called The Greatest Journey, which is a 12-week discipleship program that goes with the Operation Christmas Child ministry. And so he invites the kids to come back next week to begin that program. And then he's like, but hold on, don't go yet, because we have your free gift. And so all of the volunteers go out to the sides, and we pull the blankets off of the boxes. And the kids are like looking around, and they're like, what? Like, first of all, who are all these like white kids? Like, why are they all standing around us? Like, what in the world is going on? And then, and so then we pull the blankets off, and they're like, whoa, what are these colorful boxes? Like, where did these come from? And so then we're cutting the tape on them, and we're handing them out, and we're putting the greatest gift booklet on top, which is the summary of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and just more explanation of like who Jesus is and why they're receiving this gift, basically. And so we put the booklet with the boxes, and we start handing them out to the kids, and we hand the box to the kids, and we tell them, we look them in the eye, we tell them, Tia anau Jojosi, which is my best attempt at saying Jesus loves you in Malagasy, which is their native language. And so the kids will be like, oh, thank you, or whatever thank you is in French, I can't remember. But they'll thank us, or they'll like look kind of confused, and the kid next to him will elbow him, whisper in their ear what we were trying to say, and then they'll go, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And so we're handing out the boxes, and like as we're like handing out, my friends were handing out the last couple of boxes, I remember standing in the middle of all of this organized chaos, because that's what it is, because all the kids are like shifting, and they're like, they want to look in their boxes, but they were told not to yet, and then everybody's rushing around to like get the kids their boxes as fast as possible. And I'm standing there in the middle of all of this, and I would just feel the presence of God the first time, or for the strongest like that I've ever felt His presence before in my life. And I'm like, this is a glimpse of heaven.
Wow.
This helping each other, showing love to each other, taking care, and just this pure joy that these children are able to experience right now, and this presence right now this is a glimpse of heaven that I'm getting to see right now. And I was like this close, like I was so close to just falling on my knees and just bawling my eyes out in the middle of this church. I thankfully was able to refrain from that, because I think that my brand new friends that I just met like 3 days ago would be very confused. Not to mention everybody from the area would be very confused as to why I was crying. But yeah, that was just a hugely impactful thing for me, because that was something that you don't get to see. And it was just a real blinders off moment of just how global God is. And it was just something you don't really fully get to understand and experience in America. So that was just my biggest thing that always pops into my mind of what impacted me the most.
Do you think that sometimes the material things, especially as kids in America, and not saying that material things are bad or that money's bad, but do you think that maybe that sometimes can block that? Because I know you're talking about that heavy spiritual presence that you felt. Do you feel like that sometimes kind of blocks that, whereas those kids there, they don't have all of that distraction, and just the simple barely four walls, small space, there's no fancy anything. I mean, I'm assuming there was no electricity, just basic. Do you feel like maybe that it takes away and maybe is not, you're not as distracted? Or
I definitely think that it can help, that it does help to have those moments of just removal and being able to see things just purely as they are.
Yeah.
All of the material things and the fancy types of stuff that we have in the churches in America are nice, and they're helpful for attracting like other people in America. But whenever it comes to like, it definitely has a tendency to distract us and make us lose focus. Because we have the temptation of turning our church services into like concerts instead of keeping God at the focus of it. Right. So that I definitely feel like material things can be a distraction for kids and just people in general.
Yeah.
I think knowing the difference between knowing when to remove the distraction and feel God's presence, because He's definitely here in America as well as much as He was in Madagascar.
Right.
We just have to step away from our phones, step away from our worries, and focus on asking Him for His presence and seeking Him out, because that's what we're told to do. We're told to seek Him. We can't do that if we're also seeking out these other things as well.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes if you remove those other distractions and you kind of take more of like a bird's eye view type of thing, and you just step back. And I know sometimes, especially in America, we're very busy, and we tend to just like put our blinders on and try and get through the day and try and get through our scheduled week and our school activities and all these things. And I think sometimes it's hard to remove that. And I think you were kind of put in a situation that you were able to put all those things. You didn't have to do anything but hand out boxes. And the kids were there, and they didn't have to do anything but sing. And it was just, and you felt it was like God removed those blockages, really, that you could feel that heavy presence. But that's really awesome. Heidi, Would you like to share a little bit?
I can, but I'm just sitting here enjoying listening to Blakely. I can just listen to her talk. And okay, go ahead. What's the next story? What else did you do? I think we always learn something new or hear something different whenever I hear her tell about her experience.
Yeah.
So I love how she tells the story about what an impact it had on her. I tell a story about when so just like she said, same time frame as far as like a couple days travel on each end, about 5 days. We stayed in a central location, and every morning we would get up and we would head out. We would have 2 distributions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and come back to everybody would meet back in our central location. We kind of have a debriefing that evening. So I think they're all pretty well regimented, all the trips. So nothing is really different except for location. Every distribution is different. The feel of every distribution, the children, the atmosphere, it's all different. Now, the things that are the same, the boxes are always on the sides. They're separated boy, girl. The boys sit on one side of the room and the girls sit on the other side of the room. The boxes are always covered, so the children never see them when they're coming in. So that is all the same. Like Samaritan's Purse does a fabulous job of making sure that all of their volunteers are very well trained, so that every time you go to one of these, it is all the same. The information is the same. They don't try to add anything in. They don't take anything away. This is the program. This is what we do. This is how we share the gospel. And it is shared every single time. And I think that's the important part that I think a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
Because we assume here we're packing a Christmas present
Right.
for a needy child.
Right.
And we think humanitarian. But it's not humanitarian. We call them go boxes because they're gospel opportunities. And it is about sharing the gospel.
Yeah.
So, that's where, that's the part that I'm like, okay, well, we're here. That's what we want people to know, is as much as we want to pack very good quality boxes, because it is one box, one child, one lifetime. So each child only receives one shoebox in their life.
Wow.
And we want it to be good quality shoebox, the items that are in there. So, that's another part of it, is like when you're packing a shoebox, thinking about, yes, I have to keep within my budget, but we can also pack quality things even on a budget in the United States.
Right.
So, all of that to say, we go, and there are definitely the children opening shoeboxes. Some are packed more full than others. But every time when you think, man, this child must be very disappointed because there's only, a small number of items in a shoebox, or there are all of a certain type of item, and, maybe the child didn't want all of these particular items. Then you hear the stories of a little boy at one of our distributions said, I've always wanted a crossword. And I opened my box and there was a crossword puzzle book.
Wow.
I mean, of all the boxes, of the dozens and dozens, there's probably well over 50 children at this particular distribution, and he got a crossword puzzle book.
Wow.
I mean, that's the Lord.
Yeah.
That is the Lord.
Yeah.
There was a little girl that I was, had the opportunity to sit, and she opened her shoebox, and we were talking about the items that she had in her shoebox, and she had art kit and art supplies, and she said, I love art.
Oh.
I've always wanted to have the things to be able to do it. And she had markers, and she had crayons, and she had colored pencils, and the paint things, and I don't remember what they are, but you put a little water on there, and those kind of things. Whatever they are. Yeah. So she was so excited for that. And then there was even an opportunity where a child opened a shoebox and there were only like 2 items in the shoebox. It was full because it was like a blanket and some pencils or something. But the child was still very excited about their shoebox.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember now if it was, they had always wanted to have a blanket of their own or something like that. So you never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
For me, the last distribution for us is the one that I tell the story about. It was the most full. It was the most primitive. We drove well over an hour plus to get out to the middle of these fields, and it felt like we were going nowhere because there were, you might see on each side like spattering of what we would not consider houses, but they were houses. Like Blakely was talking about, kind of the 10 made out of 10 buildings, multiple people, probably dozens, living in each of these. So we're driving and we are on this one lane dirt road heading up, and we see these things, and we always we come up the hill and kind of come around a corner, and there's this cinder block building, and it was kind of out of place because, like I said, it was in the middle of the field, but there were just people everywhere. And before we got out of the van, we always have a little kind of briefing. Okay, here, if you do this, if we tell you to go, we need to go. If you see this, if you do, just kind of safety things and whatever. And one of the things that they had warned us was the restroom situation, because they didn't have restrooms. They had made one for us, which was a bucket, and then kind of some, I don't know, I think that somebody had said they were like some cardboard walls or something. I didn't participate in that part of the journey. But for them, it was very normal to just use the restroom where they were. So we were told to be very careful where we walked as we got there. So we always prayed, got out of the van, and we started walking. We all had our heads down, watching where we were walking. But when you opened the door, the majority of the children were already inside this big cinder block building, and you could hear them singing. Wow. And that was the first thing when you got out of the van, and there's just nothing like it. There are no words. We couldn't understand. This is one of the only places that we had to have interpreters, translators for, because they spoke Zulu, and all the other places, most of the children spoke English. So we couldn't understand what they were saying when they were singing, but you could feel it. Yeah. You just knew that they were praising God. And so we made our way into the building, and like Blakely said, we go to the very back of the building, and we're very out of place. We're very noticeably different. So we're back in the back of the building, and they had, a program just like Blakely was saying, and they were singing songs, and some of the kids did some dancing, and then it's the gospel presentation. And it's, teaching them that God created everything, and it was perfect. And sin came into the world, and we had to be saved from this sin. And it was only through Christ that we can be saved. And, the children are taught that sin, which is anything you think, anything you say, or anything you do that goes against God.
And Blakely is doing some
hand motions. Yes.
For it.
and that's very important, because the children are taught things through hand motions, through songs, through acting things out. Right. And so they would put everything into hand motions, or they have beautiful posters that they would show the children. So it's not just standing up there and preaching. It's very interactive for the children. So it's a very good program.
It's designed for kids to be able to learn from. Not just, this stuff happened, okay, here's a box. It's very much, we want it to be as impactful as we can.
Right. And so in the presentation, they're taught that this gift that we're given, that Jesus gave us, this free gift. Well, it's very hard for children who've never received a gift to understand what it is to get a free gift. Right. They've never had anything like that. And we're telling them, oh yeah, Jesus died on the cross and to save you from your sins. It's a free gift of salvation. But you can't understand what free gift is if you've never had a gift.
Right.
So that's where the shoebox comes in. So now we're giving you a free gift. You don't have to do anything. It's free. We want to use this opportunity to tell you that Jesus loves you.
Yeah.
And this is what it means to have something for free. So that's when they're given their shoebox. And like Blakely said, they are invited to a 12-week discipleship program where they learn they've learned who Jesus is, but now we're going to learn what it means to live a life with him, to walk with him daily. And so that is the 12-week discipleship program, which is led by the local pastors. So it's not foreigners coming in and then leaving. It is people who can continue that walk for the rest of their lives, that know them dearly. So we go through the presentation just like Blakely talked about, and we move to the front of the room. My particular job at this distribution was I was cutting the tape. So I cut the tape and I hand to the next person. They put the greatest gift booklet on there, like Blakely said, and then the rest of the volunteers take those and they are distributing those, handing those out. Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. Then the countdown happens. I don't know if she said she was lucky enough that they did 3, 2, 1, open your box. We started at 10, and it was a very long 10 countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 1 is never going to get here. They finally get to 1, and they open the shoe boxes, and the kids just scream. They are so excited. And so, to me, I think that's why it's called Christmas, even though it's not on Christmas. Because those screams are what our children sound like when they get the thing they've always wanted.
Yeah.
And so these kids are getting things they've never had before. They've never seen before. Colors and smells and materials. And they could not have even imagined. So my friend and I, we took a group of boys into another room so they'd have space to open their shoe boxes. And these were the older boys, so they were like 10 to 14 years old. And this is our opportunity as volunteers to be able to interact with the children. And so we would go down the line and so what did you get in your shoebox? What was your favorite thing? And just questions like that. And the first little boy I went to, so what did you get in your shoebox? What was the favorite thing that you got in there? And so he opens it up and he's very excited to show me what he got. And he pulls out a package of underwear. And I didn't know what to say. I don't know how to interact with a package of underwear. So, wow, that's great. And then I moved down to the next boy. And so the next little boy, it was, because you think, oh, they're going to open it up and they're going to say, oh, I got, pens, or I got, I don't know, markers, or I got a ball or something, a harmonica. I don't know. Not clothing. Like it just didn't. Yeah.
Underwear, which is every kid's nightmare, right?
Yes.
Over here, at least.
Yes.
Socks and underwear. Mom.
Yes, exactly. And so the next little boy, he got flip-flops. And these were just red Old Navy flip-flops. Nothing that we would say was fancy or anything. And so I was like, okay, well, at least we can have a conversation about flip-flops. So we're like, oh, they're red. Do you like the color red? Oh, yes. He likes red. And so we took the shoe and we're holding it up to his foot to see if it would fit. And we really thought it would fit. And, so we were very much having a good conversation over here about these flip-flops. And as we were talking, I look over and there's another little boy. He's about 2 boys down and he's opening his shoebox. And he's kind of slow at what's, kind of digging through it and whatever. And all of a sudden he pulls out, and like I said, I'm seeing this out of the corner of my eye and I'm seeing him pull out white cloth. And his response was, they're so new and clean and white. And they were just white undershirts. And he pulls them apart and there were 2 of them. And he was so excited about these white t-shirts. And so, I that kind of resonated with me a little bit. And, it's one of those, I hear it and I see it, but I needed to process it a little bit. So the time was kind of wrapping up. We had to head back, and we at the end, we pray with the pastors that are there. We help to kind of clean up some of the trash from opening boxes and opening the things that are in the boxes. The kids, they're just kids, so trash is left. So we're there to clean up some of that. And you see them outside sitting together in their groups, and they're kind of going through. One of the pastors kind of explained to me that the kids sit outside and go through the boxes again with each other because they're not sure if we're going to take them back.
Oh, wow.
Take the boxes away from them. Wow. And so they're a little timid in the beginning, but when they go out and they're with their friends, they can be a little more comfortable without these foreigners being there. So anyway, so we're helping them get cleaned up, and I look down and there's an old flip-flop that's just laying, like an old discarded sandal. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it was probably the boy that I had been talking to. He had already taken off the old flip-flops and put on the new ones. Wow. So they do love it. They do. But so we had a long drive home that evening. I say home, back to, our central location where we all meet up. Yeah. And as we try to journal so we can remember the highlights and all the things that occurred during the distribution. And so, I'm just kind of praying about it and really thinking through what was my high, what really impacted me, and there was I was trying to look through my papers to see if I have it here, but, there's a scripture that talks about how in 2 Corinthians, I believe it's 5:17, where it talks about when we accept Christ, that we are a new creation, that all things have passed away. All things have become new. And that's what I think about when I think about those white t-shirts is, that's what Christ sees in us when we accept him and we are washed clean by his blood, that we are made new and that all the old things are gone. And that is what sticks with me is when I think about that. And that is available to all of us. And like Blakely said, our God is a global God. And so it's available to everybody around the world.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that, because as you were telling the story, I wrote down the image of Jesus's gift to us, because the way you were describing how the kids were just so excited, and especially the little boy with the 2 white t-shirts, it's such a perfect image of the excitement that we have when we accept Christ. And we see this gift and we see the newness, and not just accept Christ, but when he forgives us of the sins we continue to do. Yes. We continue to be washed by him and made new. And it's like a gift that just keeps giving. It really is. And it's such a great picture. And even the little boy he had his old flip-flops on. And we assume, right, we didn't see him do it, but we assume that someone at least discarded their old flip-flops and put on the new ones. And it's just such a wonderful picture of God's giving a new life to us. And again, not just when you accept him, but throughout your journey on this earth, you put on that new being, the new flip-flops. You put them on and you accept that gift. It's such a beautiful picture. Yeah, it really is.
I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this episode. I've split this episode into 2 parts. So to continue to listen to Heidi and Blakely's story, go to episode 4, Special Delivery, Part 2. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a review. This helps to recommend this podcast to others. You can also follow my Instagram at Moms and Mountains Podcast, all one word. Bye-bye for now, and we'll see you at the next episode.